I give the call to the member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. There have been very few or more honourable or decent members of this place than the 10th member for Werriwa, and I am of course referring to the late John Kerin AO. My predecessor, Gough Whitlam, would of course insist that for the sake of setting the record completely straight, I should add that John Kerin was also the second member for Macarthur and a former member of the Mittagong Shire Council from 1969 to 1971. The latter was a feat that the former Prime Minister never achieved. And so, Mr Deputy Speaker, I rise to pay tribute to John Kerin, a member of this House in the period of 1972 to 75 as a member for Macarthur, and then again from 1978 to 1993 as the member for Werriwa. John was known as the most efficient Minister for Agriculture this nation has ever known, and with no disrespect to the honourable incumbent, I think that is right. But he was much more than that, very much more. John's ministerial career was stellar. At different times he was Treasurer, Minister for Trade and Overseas Development, Minister for Transport and Communications, along with his beloved agriculture, and also Minister for Energy. Born in Bowral and raised in Yerrinbul in the Southern Highlands on his family's farm, John later attended Hurlston Agricultural High School, which is still in the electorate of Werriwa. John spent a period of time in his youth in the poultry industry. Perhaps it was here that his famous ability to hypnotise chickens was developed and perfected. His other jobs around this time included axeman and bricksetter. Given John's size, it's not surprising he found his way into these industries. Later, and always seeking to learn, John formally completed his studies at the University of New England and the Australian National University. He had a sharp mind but an even sharper wit. Few in this House have ever possessed a more self-deprecating and droll sense of humour. The parliamentary records note that John went on 52 official conferences, delegations and visits during his parliamentary service. Notwithstanding his frequent overseas travel, John was a highly respected and much-loved local ALP branch member. Attending branch meetings, even while Treasurer, was a priority to him. His white sea-plated Comcar would inevitably show up at Monday night's meeting at Macquarie Fields Indoor Sports Centre to deliver his insightful local members' reports. John's involvement with the ALP goes back to his earliest days. He founded the Southern Highlands branch and at various times was both its president and secretary. Notwithstanding a small hiatus, John never wandered far from his belief in the party. He knew the party better than anyone, despite knowing its faults, also knew its incalculable force for good. Post-politics, John's life was as full as ever. He never stood still and never really retired. He was chair of the Australian Meat and Livestock Corporation, a director of the CSIRO, and at various times chair and member of the Crawford Fund for 17 years. John's farewell took place at Old Parliament's House. It was, Mr Deputy Speaker, an appropriate setting for a man who served his electorate, party and nation in that place for so many years with such distinction. For many aspects, John was old school, especially in his manner and style. On reflection, John's interest in and contributions to Australian agriculture was entirely in keeping with his character. For John was a hands-on man, a practical man, always looking for solutions and answers. And we're better to use those skills than in an area of public policy that requires such an approach. And so it is entirely appropriate that this Minister for Werriwa, the 14th, pays tribute to my predecessor in this new Parliament House, the same building John attended in the second half of his parliamentary career. Because while John was an old-school man, he was always looking to the future for solutions to today's and tomorrow's challenge, and it is in this building that John did as well as that, and that's what we're doing here now. To June and John's family, I offer my sincere condolences, but I also give thanks for a life well lived and for an example I will strive to follow.
And I thank the member for Werriwa for their contribution.